The road to graduation is not traveled alone. There are many individuals in the student's life who help pave the way to this important milestone today, many of whom are tied so closely to LSU, many of whom are a part of the students' lives inside and outside the university gates. First, I would like to recognize the parents, grandparents, spouses, and children and other honored guests that are here to celebrate this wonderful achievement. We applaud not only your loved ones' successes, but also your tireless effort and support along the way to this important milestone. Today's commencement marks one step in completing the journey of a lifetime, but also in the beginning of a new adventure for you and your graduates. Please stand if you are a parent, grandparent, friend, spouse, family member to be recognized by our audience today. Thank you. Our faculty represent another critical guidepost along the road to graduation. University faculty aren't just exceptional scholars, scientists, and researchers. They're also skilled educators committed to providing an excellent foundation to every student who crosses their path. I ask at this point that our faculty please stand to be recognized by our audience and our graduates. Faculty, please stand. Thank you. The summer class of 2014 today has 657 graduates, 359 baccalaureate degrees, bachelor's degrees, and 298 graduate degrees. 328 of the graduates today are men, 239 are women. We represent 41 parishes from the state of Louisiana. 34 states are represented today, and 28 countries are represented today, ranging from Afghanistan to Vietnam. Our undergraduates range in age from 20 to 40. This is truly an impressive class and adds to the most successful class of graduates that we have had at LSU in our entire history. This year marks the largest graduating class of women in the history of LSU. This year also marks the largest graduating class of African Americans and Latinos in the history of LSU. Now, if I could briefly address the graduates today. On this special day, it is an honor for me to stand before you to officially recognize this significant milestone. Ceremonies like these, which began over 600 years ago, were created to signify to society that you have mastered an academic field of study. Today, we celebrate your academic mastery and we present your accomplishments to the community, the state of Louisiana, and this great nation because of the impact that you had on your achievements as a graduate of LSU. Now, this day certainly doesn't belong to those sitting before us today. As we mentioned, the family members it belongs to. It belongs to the citizens of Louisiana, our outstanding faculty and staff throughout our campus, our over 250,000 alumni and friends who have supported you each and every step of the way, who believe in your capacity to make society a much better and more vibrant place, an intellectually stimulating and sustainable place for all. I'd like to take a moment to look around you as well, to look at your fellow classmates, and to keep in mind, as of today, you're among this nation's top 32nd percentile in educational achievement and success in the United States. Even more importantly, as of today, you are among the world's top 7th percentile in educational attainment and success. In other words, the attainment of a college degree places you in an enviable place, both right here in the United States, but also around the world. For our graduate students, the figures are even more impressive because you are among truly the world's elite in educational success. For this reason, I share these facts with you are twofold. First, to remind you of what a significant accomplishment you have actually achieved, and for your family members to understand that this truly is a significant accomplishment. Second, and more importantly, however, it is to remind you of your responsibility and obligation to those in need of similar educational opportunities that will undoubtedly enable them to maximize their potential both as individuals but also as global citizens. As one of the world's most educated citizens with the great potential to help others, you are now being handed the mantle, enabling you to provide widespread hope and widespread global opportunity. Through your individual and collective intellectual ability, you are needed to help free others from the bonds of human ignorance and prejudice. You are needed to make the right social choices that expand the prosperity of others while reducing the inequality that exists within our world. You are needed to provide the future ideas that will help feed and shelter an expanding world population. And you are needed to ensure that the next generation of children and students have more educational opportunity and economic opportunity than those of the previous generations who have enjoyed them, no matter whether you live in Louisiana, Los Angeles, London, or Laos. In short, you are needed to make the world a better place. You have the tools, you have the skills, and you have the talent, and the benefits that will reap from your impact will not only benefit your local communities, but your state, national, and for many of you, the international communities around the globe. Every one of us today that are sitting here today have great faith in you, and we know that you will accomplish for so many in need through your influence. The LSU family wishes you the best of luck in these endeavors and will take great pride in everything you accomplish throughout your lifetime. And remember that you are never alone in your path toward global success and greater economic impact for those that extend well beyond the borders of our neighborhoods, our state, and our nation. Your alma mater forever stands strong with you, and your alma mater forever stands strong with you. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our commencement speaker, Dr. Keith Comeaux. On August 5th in 2012, NASA's rover Curiosity landed on Mars. Dr. Comeaux was the flight director for Curiosity's entry, descent, and landing, which was cheered on by millions which watched it worldwide live on television. But his journey didn't start there. In December of 1989, Dr. Comeaux stood right where you stand today, in cap and gown, excited about his future, nervous about what the next chapter in his life would be, graduating from LSU with a bachelor's degree in both mechanical engineering and physics. He continued his education, earning a master's degree and doctoral degrees in aeronautics and astronomics from Stanford University, proving that you can never have too much of a good thing. He holds an MBA from UCLA, the Anderson School of Management. In 2006, he joined the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, more commonly known as JPL. Dr. Comeaux has been recognized with numerous awards and honors during his careers, among them the Boeing Superior Performance Award, the George Washington Engineer of the Year Award, the AIAA Lawrence Sperry Award, and notable contributions of a young, aspiring, career-oriented individual, and age 35 under to the advancement of the Aeronautics and Astronomics Institute. In addition to numerous professional appointments, Dr. Comeaux continues to give back to LSU by serving on LSU's Department of Mechanical and Industrial Engineering, its advisory board, and in 2013 was named to the LSU's Alumni Association's Hall of Distinction. Furthermore, he is one of the first individuals I had an opportunity to meet a year and a half ago, because he did not miss an opportunity to attend a crawfish boil in Manhattan Beach, California, where he flew down from Northern California to participate. He doesn't miss his crawfish boils. So he joined me, and I had a great opportunity to interact with him a year and a half ago. Honored guests, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome home Dr. Keith Comeaux.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander. Faculty and staff, parents, friends, loved ones, honored guests, and the LSU class of 2014, thank you for inviting me to be your commencement speaker. I've had the good fortune to experience this rich tradition as a student on 4 different occasions. It's a true honor to be able to share this experience with you today. Yet, I must confess, I can remember the speaker from only my most recent graduation just a few years ago, and it was my classmate. I do remember a few things about my commencement here at LSU 25 years ago. For example, I graduated in the fall, and it was a very cold winter day, even for Louisiana in December. I had just completed my trip around the world at the Chimes. And I was leaving town with big ideas about the future in just a few weeks. So as I prepared for this address, I identified two goals that I thought would make this chat with you worthwhile. Number one, do a favor for the students and be memorable. And number two, share some stories and lessons learned from going to Mars that the class of 2014 might find useful in their careers. So let's get goal number one accomplished. I'd like to ask you all to perform a little memory exercise with me that in 25 years will hopefully help you recall who your commencement speaker was. Pull out your smartphones and Google the following phrase: 5 best NASA scientists ever. You might have to use quotes, depending on your search engine. 5 best NASA scientists ever. And while you're doing that, I'm going to take this opportunity to tweet a picture of the class of 2014 from the podium. Wow, this is a big class. I can't get it all to fit. All right, there we go. So by now you should have the article up and be realizing that this list has absolutely nothing about scientific prowess at NASA. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll find the jubilant celebration guy. Now, every time you see, there we go. Every time you see that blue-shirted blur on a documentary, a commercial, a newsreel, or a spoof on NASA, you should now be able to recall that that guy was your commencement speaker. And while my colleagues and others may not understand, let it be known that jubilant celebration is not an unusual sight on a Saturday night in Tiger Stadium. I confess I also had an ulterior motive for having you go through that exercise. What you and I just did was simply inconceivable 25 years ago when I was sitting in your seat. The technological seeds that may have been sown at that time could have predicted that the technology, computers, the internet, the telecommunication capabilities may have been there, but the creative application of those technologies were still locked in the minds of kids who were still in school. Words like Google, Tweet, Yahoo, Facebook, Shazam, Instagram had entirely different meanings when I was in your seats. Yet in just 25 years, these and other technology advances have transformed the way we interact with each other and have indeed changed the fabric of our lives. I can't tell you what the next 25 years are going to bring, but I can offer a few lessons learned from the struggle to put a 1-ton rover on the surface of Mars. So let's begin with goal number 2. The sky crane story. The Mars Curiosity rover is most well known for its novel approach to landing using the now famous sky crane to lower the rover to the surface. When I was first asked to join JPL to help land this rover, I thought it was just plain crazy. But sky crane actually makes a lot of sense. This rover is the largest object we had ever landed on another planet. It's the size of a small SUV. With larger payloads come larger rocket engines, and with larger engines come larger landing platforms. The conventional wisdom of landing on other planets would have Curiosity driving off of a tall, potentially unstable platform before ever planting wheels on the surface. Neil and Buzz, they had a ladder. How would Curiosity be able to get down to the surface without tipping over or otherwise getting stuck? Enter Sky Crane. By placing the landing craft on top of the rover instead of underneath it, like a jetpack, Sky Crane could fly Curiosity down to the surface and land her directly on her wheels, which also do double duty as pretty good landing gear. So lesson learned number 1, sometimes you have to turn a problem upside down to find a solution. The small stuff. As Curiosity neared Mars, the engineering team performed an exhaustive ritual of double and triple checking everything to ensure that nothing was missed. In the last week before landing, after the last commands had been sent, the guidance team recognized that they had overlooked an obscure parameter buried deep in the software among tens of thousands of others. It was off by just a few millimeters. The team went back to their simulations to understand the impact of flying with that error. They came back satisfied that it wasn't really an issue. Curiosity was ready to go, and we shouldn't perturb her on what was now the day before landing. Others were not so easily convinced. What if there was something else related to this error that we haven't thought of? The unknown unknown. If there's an error in the system, we should fix it, however small, to give Curiosity the best chance of landing safely on the surface. At the end of the day, we did correct the error, but our project manager shared with us that this was the most difficult decision that he had made in his 40-year career. Which brings us to lesson number 2. Sometimes you do have to sweat the small stuff. The ballast mass story. Having arrived at Mars, Curiosity had to decelerate from a screaming 13,000 miles an hour to absolutely 0 on the surface. How successful we were was going to be measured by how fast the rover was traveling the instant it reached the ground. The vehicle would transform itself from a spinning spacecraft to a hypersonic entry vehicle, from a capsule to a load suspended under a parachute, from a parachute to a rocket-powered jetpack, from a jetpack to the Sky Crane. And that Sky Crane was then required to fly itself safely away from the rover upon severing its connections. All of this in a span of just 7 minutes without intervention from mission control. To make that first transition from a spinning spacecraft to an entry capsule, 2 150-pound blocks of tungsten were jettisoned from one side of the capsule to put it off kilter, a necessary condition to give the capsule the required lift for the autopilot. Once the entry capsule had completed its job, it was the parachute's turn, and another 6 50-pound blocks of tungsten were ejected from the other side of the vehicle to recenter the weight of the capsule for the neck-jarring parachute deployment that was coming up next. This maneuver was fondly known as Straighten Up and Fly Right, or SUFFER, because we love acronyms. But the team loathes bringing over 600 pounds of ballast all the way to Mars simply to be ejected on the surface. All sorts of fancy contraptions to shift the weight of the capsule dynamically, to generate lift by using flaps, or otherwise to put all of that weight of tungsten to good scientific use were examined. But in the final analysis, all other approaches had their problems and increased the complexity of the system unnecessarily. Jettisoning ballast was the right way to go. So lesson learned number 3, sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution, no matter how clumsy or unsophisticated it may look. The gravity story. Curiosity touched down on the surface of Mars at an unexpectedly slow speed. The landing system was designed to land precisely at 1.7 miles per hour. Too fast, and a hard landing could turn our rover into a stationary lander. Too slow, and the Sky Crane could drift off course and scorch the rover with its landing rockets. Millions of computer simulations of the landing demonstrated that the speed should never fall below 1.5 miles per hour, even under the most stressing conditions. Curiosity landed at an exceptionally gentle 1.4 miles per hour. A small transgression, to be sure, and fortunately in the right direction, but it suggested that there was something wrong about our assumptions. It turns out that we got gravity wrong on Mars. It's well known that a planet's gravity is not constant across its surface. The gravity in Death Valley is stronger than the top of Mount Everest. We were landing at the bottom of a 96-mile-wide crater in the shadow of a 15,000-foot mountain. We failed not only to imagine that gravity could be significantly different than other places that we had landed before, but also to recognize the impact it could have on our landing. We had never tried a different gravity strength in those millions of simulations, and we got lucky. So lesson learned number 4, sometimes you have to challenge even your most basic assumptions. Yellowknife Bay. It ends up being that the most scientifically interesting landscapes are the ones that are hardest to get to and navigate. Curiosity science objectives were buried in the layers of rock in the foothills of that 15,000-foot peak. But Curiosity still needed a 7-mile wide by 12-mile long landing strip. It would have to drive to its ultimate destination. But a funny thing happened on the way to Mount Sharp. Curiosity had landed only a few hundred yards away of what appeared to be an ancient dry lake. But this tantalizing landscape was in the opposite direction from our destination. Should we explore Yellowknife Bay and risk wasting precious time on a prospect that may not pan out? Or press on to our destination and miss a golden opportunity? In the end, we couldn't resist and we went for it, and we hit the mother lode. Curiosity discovered that the bedrock in Yellowknife Bay was mudstone laid down billions of years ago by a freshwater lake. And that ancient lake had all the right ingredients to support primitive organisms had they ever existed at that time in Martian history. Curiosity had met all of its science objectives in the very first year of the mission without ever going to Mount Sharp. Which brings us to lesson learned number 5. Sometimes you should follow your curiosity, even if it leads you away from your ultimate goal. Sol 200. 200 Martian days, or sols, into Curiosity's mission, the science team was well on their way to making significant discoveries on the red planet. It was evident that water had once streamed down the crater rim in abundance, and the rover was now sitting in a dry lake bed. The rover had just taken a bite out of the bedrock from the first ever hole drilled on another planet, and it was ready to begin analysis on the sample when Curiosity's computer began to misbehave. The rover has 2 computers. One is a prime, one is a backup. The prime computer is the brains, while the backup remains in a dormant state until it's called into action. The computer takes care of housekeeping duties, communications with Earth, science activities, driving, taking pictures, etc. It also has the smarts to give up when it's having a problem and ultimately turn over control to the backup computer. On Sol 200, the rover had just waken up from its overnight sleep and received its daily instructions from the mission team, but it failed to start executing them. It also failed to recognize and correct its own problem. The prime computer had developed amnesia and insomnia and could no longer perform the most basic tasks. The rover was also consuming energy at an alarming rate, and the team was concerned that if the batteries drained too low, the rover could shut itself off, never to wake up again. With the clock running out, the mission team intervened and forced the backup computer to take over and ultimately recover normal operations. Which brings us to lesson learned number 5. Sometimes you have to bench your starting quarterback and put your second string into the game to save the day. The wheel story. Having completed its investigation of Yellowknife Bay, Curiosity began its 6-mile drive to the foothills of Mount Sharp. But along the way, the expected dimples and dents that we had previously noted on Curiosity's wheels were turning into punctures, cracks, and holes. This was not expected, and it was worrisome. Curiosity's wheels were designed to traverse hard bedrock, drifting sand, dune fields, and rock-strewn boulder fields. the typical stuff we had seen during 6 previous landed missions on Mars. But Curiosity was driving across bedrock that had sharp, immobile rocks cemented into it. When a wheel rolled over these features, they did not give way, but held fast and forced the rover to shift its weight onto a sharp point. Dimples became punctures, cracks became gaping holes. Though the wheels don't look so great in 2 years into the mission today, the good news is that the wear and tear has no perceptible impact on driving performance. But you can bet that our next rover, to be launched in 2020, will have a newly designed set of wheels. So lesson learned, number 7, sometimes you do have to reinvent the wheel. Teamwork. As I'm sure you can imagine, it takes an enormous team to achieve the remarkable feat of landing a 1-ton rover on another planet. Thousands of people at NASA, as well as the hundreds of contractors that support our missions, are part of the team. In fact, we had a team of 800 scientists alone responsible for directing the science activities after we had landed. Our project manager once compared the situation to a cross-country family vacation with 800 kids in the back seat, urging us to stop at every interesting site. But the size of our team extends beyond our badged employees, contractors, and scientists. It includes you, the U.S. taxpayer. Each of you here today contributed an average of $7 to this mission over the past dozen years. This is your rover. So think about that for a moment. For less than the price of a movie ticket, we've done something that's never been done before in the history of humankind, and we're unlocking the secrets of our nearest planetary neighbor. To be sure, we don't load up a suitcase of cash, place it inside the rover, and shoot it to Mars. That money is spent here. It creates jobs, it stimulates investment in technology, it quenches our very human thirst for exploration, and it inspires the next generation. Lesson learned, number 8, it takes a village to make the impossible possible. The final story, following my curiosity. When I was in your seat 25 years ago, I had a dream to become an astronaut. In pursuit of that goal, I headed straight to graduate school to study hypersonic aerodynamics, specifically planes that could take off from a runway and fly directly into orbit. This was projected to be the future of spaceflight at the time, and several projects were already on the drawing boards. But by the time I finished graduate school, the momentum had shifted, the projects were canceled, and jobs in my rather narrow specialty were hard to come by. I eventually found myself interviewing with Hughes Aircraft, which built satellites in the Los Angeles area. It seemed interesting, but I knew practically nothing about satellites. However, when I visited the facility for a second interview, I learned that 4 of its employees had been selected to be NASA payload specialists, and one of them was on my interview schedule. He informed me about a new satellite under development that would employ ion propulsion, the stuff of science fiction. When I saw the various satellites under construction in their factory, I was hooked. I jumped in with both feet and drew upon the foundational knowledge that I had gained right here at LSU. It was difficult shifting gears, but eventually I got my bearings. And 4 years later, we were flying the world's largest, most powerful telecommunications satellite, using ion propulsion to do it, and selling new satellites to the likes of DirecTV, XM Radio, and the Air Force. But my journey didn't end there. 8 years ago, while still at Hughes, which is now part of Boeing, I got a call from a former colleague who had left to go to JPL. There was an opening that I was almost perfectly suited for, with the rather diverse background that I had had. They'd wanted me to come help land a rover on Mars with this new thing called Skycrane. And that was an offer that I just couldn't refuse. Lesson learned number 9, shoot for the stars, but always follow your curiosity. At worst, you might struggle a bit during your journey, but it's more likely that you'll find your calling that makes you happy. And if you get lucky, instead of a star, you may land on Mars. Thank you for having me as your commencement speaker. Good luck, Godspeed, and go Tigers.
All those graduating today, please rise and be recognized.